Hi, everybody. Welcome to an historically important and cool and fun edition of Six Questions with Dan and Michelle, which must begin by my saying, hello, Michelle.
Hello, Dan.
How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
I can tell. Yeah. Um, we had interesting cat stories that Michelle brought in today. So we've been through
Oh.
a lot of cool stuff already today. But not as cool as what's about to happen. So, by way of introduction, everyone, you know that our guests on the show usually have some sort of connection to our company. Um, Today's guest has a really historically significant connection to our company. He is Fred Keller. Hi, Fred.
Hi, Dan and Michelle. Very good to see you today.
Yeah,
Nice
good to
to
see you
see
too.
you.
Fred is coming to us from Jackson Hole, Wyoming. He just showed us what it looks like out his window. So I would like to announce that the company is moving to Jackson Hole, Wyoming tomorrow.
Yes.
Um, but Fred was the founder of Grand Rapids-based company, which is still thriving and still doing great, called Cascade Engineering, and they were back in 1999 North Star's very first client. But there's more to it than that. I don't want to go into the whole thing. We could not have started this company without Fred. And I think I'll just leave it at that. So I'm sure I've told you this many times, Fred, but thank you for that.
Indeed.
Um, and it's been such a great experience, not only working with their company, but all of the things that are important to Fred and the things he's done. So um, that's been one of the coolest experiences I've had just as a professional is trying to keep up with you.
Well, the first question for you, Dan, is how did I first find you? Do you remember?
I do. In fact, when we first started working together, it was under the guise of the company I was working for at the time. I'm pretty sure the statute of limitations has run out on any lawsuits now, but let's just say that my former employer probably wasn't too happy with the decision either one of us made. But I mean, we had the opportunity to work with you on the CCV, which I'm trying to remember what that stood for, but it was an entire car body made of plastic injection molding,
The Chrysler
which
concept vehicle. See,
right,
yeah.
Ah.
right. And so Fred's company was looking for some support on that, and we got the chance to get involved with that, and it spawned this thing that just like never really ends. So we have six scintillating questions for Fred, and I hope he's ready. He's probably not, but it doesn't matter because we're going to get started with them anyway.
I'm
But
nervous. I'm nervous.
oh, you should be because
Yeah.
this can be quite a hair raising experience. Not for me because I don't have any, but Fred, I'm going to get into some bigger picture things in subsequent questions, but I want to start with this just to set some context for people. You started your company in 1973, kind of off in the corner of another company, of a tool and die shop in Grand Rapids. And from there, you started this injection molding operation that turned into this massive thriving thing it is today. So my question is, did you have a vision at the time for what it would become, or did you just kind of realize in the course of doing it that it could become that?
That's a good question. And basically, I did not. And the world was a different world back then. We didn't have this idea where you go out and raise a bunch of money from folks and have a pitch deck and all that sort of thing. The fortunate thing was that the little company you talk about was my father's business, and he was kind enough to help me get a building built and introduce me to the bank and give me a small loan, and I was able to be in business 1973. If you remember 19, you probably don't remember
I
1974, but
was 6, but I remember a few things.
1974 was a bad year.
Hmm.
Yeah, we had gas
Oil
lines all over the
crisis and all that
place.
sort of thing. Yeah.
It was not working well. And I learned that the most deafening sound in a manufacturing facility is silence. Uh, you did not like to hear silence, and we had silence for a couple of months, but that was it. After that, we continued to do quite well and grow the business. I started in a little 10,000 square foot building and expanded four times, and then 1984 finally built a second building, and 86 expanded that, and so on and so forth. So it's been the 80s were a period of big growth, and we were also working very hard at that point in time, trying to figure out how we could outperform the Japanese firms that were eating everybody's manufacturing lunch at the time. And that was
I remember that was a big theme in the 80s. American manufacturers
yeah,
were the Japanese were the boogie.
yeah,
And everybody was trying to figure out. But as I recall, you actually did learn a lot from what I mean some of their concepts, some of their manufacturing processes. You learned a lot from them and kind of
absolutely.
made them work for Cascade.
Yeah. In fact, I had two Japanese joint ventures at one point in time, where they were joint ventures in the U.S. That they wanted to be in the U.S. and we wanted to learn from them, so we worked together to make that happen.
Fred, how do you define success at this point in your life, and how has that definition changed?
Yeah, it's good. That's a really great question. One thing that I have learned is that folks who age, and I am one of those aged people, if you do the math, you'll figure out that I'm up there. But they really tend to do one of two things. One is they tend to maybe retire to Florida and look for some enjoyment, or they try to figure out how to do something different because they've been retired. And that's often hard to find that kind of sweet spot. But I like to say that my life has been evolving over the decades. I started when I started my company. I was thinking about making the enterprise work and how to work that with the family and all the challenges you have with spending 18 hours a day on work and some time with the family, and then you got to get sleep and something else. So it was focused on the enterprise. And as Dan recalled, in the 90s, we had a chance to really start thinking about how do we impact community, and that's what you helped me with a lot, was understanding how we might be not only facilitating our work in community, but also how do we maybe be an inspiration to folks in the community, and because we were doing some pretty remarkable things. You remember we were honored at the White House for our welfare to career program, and
I
that
know.
was
I got to go with you. It was awesome.
yeah, it was pretty remarkable to be able to have that kind of recognition and to be able to perhaps be inspiring to some folks along there. But in my retirement years, what I'm finding is I like to move beyond that to the system level. And right now, the systems that are really most interesting to me are our economy, because I think we're in a really kind of a real different spot from an economic standpoint, and our education system, and they're related. But the idea that we've got AI coming at us is such a great force, and is an ability to have two things happen. One is we really get content is much more ubiquitous. Some people call it democratic, because it's now everybody can have access to content that they didn't have before. It's also somewhat evenly distributed from the cost standpoint, so it's relatively inexpensive for people to have all the content they need. So education becomes totally different. And my thought there is that we need to flip what we've been judging as important in education, which has been content. But now we're going to say the most important thing about education, which the employers have been saying for quite a long time, is life skills. your critical thinking skills, presentation skills, being able to connect with people, work with teams, etc. Those are so important, and yet we don't teach that. And so how do we flip our education system away from content to life skills? I think that's the big challenge.
Yeah.
In the economy, we've got a situation where we've been practicing for the last 4 decades, 5 decades, this concept of let's just let our free enterprise system work and it will solve all our problems. We don't need to have interventions by the government. And the economists would say there's this old Keynesian versus Hayek approach to this world. And it's a debate that's been going on for 50, 60, 70 years. And Milton Friedman kind of won that debate back in the 70s and 80s. And we've been practicing that. We've been trying it. But the result is we've got way too many families that are experiencing financial stress, constant financial stress. Sociologists would tell us that that's a time when, inappropriate or our desperate behavior takes over, and it's not healthy. I would say that my opinion is that's kind of driving our politics today. That we've got so many people that are just not able to make it in today's world.
Yeah.
A book by Michael Sandel, a Harvard professor, talks about the idea of the tyranny of merit, he calls it, and the idea that meritocracy will always work. We that's what we think the American dream is, and now we find that you can be working very hard, doing your very best, and you still can't make enough to make ends meet. So that's the economy that needs fixing. That's my big priority right now.
Yeah, Fred, I agree with you. I think the more that we keep digitizing, especially with children, I mean, they're coming up into that world where we're seeing kids so quickly, I mean, glomming onto phones, glomming onto computers, those life skills like communication, it's getting further and further away. The people are, kids are starting to think, oh, well, you communicate and all you have to do is text, or video call, and you're not getting those face-to-face interactions or having to deal with uncomfortable feelings sometimes when you're communicating. And it's so important that we really keep that at the heart, because I mean, we drive this world. It's people that drive it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the AI is I think it's such a fascinating time. The idea that in today's world we can think of this as a crisis, and in many respects it is. We're at crisis levels in many directions, but it's also the potential for a catalyst for change.
Yeah.
And I think that is that's the exciting thing about this point in time. That's how I get excited. I don't know how many more decades I've got, maybe a couple. But if we got, in my mind, that just drives me to try to make this change happen quicker.
You're already kind of starting to answer this question, but I'm going to riff off. You wrote a piece on LinkedIn about a month ago where you talked about how you feel that some of the people that are in the best position to kind of come up with the answers to society's questions right now are the owners and the leaders of mid-sized businesses. And this is you've always kind of thought this way. Like you've always, as long as I can remember anyway, you've always believed that the people who really can affect change are the people exercising leadership in the trenches, which they're historically difficult to mobilize, but the thinking is there. So my question is, what was it that happened over the course of your career and your life that sort of made you see that?
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know that I think that I think there's a couple things I would say to that. One is that when you're running a business, there's a phrase that's often used in the leadership circles that the position at the top is quite lonely. you don't often have a chance to talk with people who have the same responsibilities that you do, and they're so unique in every business. So it's a really interesting spot to be. The result is that CEOs or people in the top leaders of their businesses are faced with having to do with to uh, really solve complex problems, I guess is the way to say it.
Hmm.
The running a business is not simple. It isn't as simple as just following the finances or just as simple as being with the people or whatever. It's a whole lot of things you have to do simultaneously. And so business leaders are pretty good at that. The reason we say privately held businesses, though, are really more effective at this, there's some really interesting numbers here. If you take businesses that are 100 million in revenue or more, um, they're about 90% privately owned. And this cohort creates 80% of the new jobs that are in the marketplace. So it's a really prolific uh, uh, group. They're very qualified. They're very good at solving complex problems, but they haven't been given we would say, the agency to be able to go ahead and solve those problems, the bigger system problems. So I think my objective is to work with folks to get at the systems level to solve this very complex problem of how do we take a system, an economic system that's done so well in many cases, but has got some real troubles as well.
I remember an attempt to do something along these lines in Grand Rapids, like more than 20 years ago, which was called the Delta Strategy. And and I was involved with it for a while. As I recall, there were a lot of interesting processes involved with that, but I'm not sure that the desired result, which was that the people would really be given the agency and the power to solve the problems, was ever really completely brought to its fruition. And probably some things were learned from that, which probably some of which you're probably still applying to what you're trying to do right now.
Yes, that would be true, Dan. We ran Delta Strategy for a number of years, and it felt like it was it evolved into what some people would say a kumbaya session, where you just kind of feel mutually difficult, but let's get together and feel miserable together. But it wasn't in the problem solving mode.
Right. Right. So like I'm not sure we've found the way to give these people the agency. I think maybe we found some ways not to do it through that process.
Exactly.
But it's just like, I mean, we were just trying to solve a problem the other day. And like we spent like 2 hours on something and it wasn't the answer. And I said, well, okay, so everything that didn't work, you can cross off the list and it gets you that much closer to the thing that does. And I think it's like this with what you're talking about too. The answer is there.
Yep.
If anybody can figure it out, it's probably you. But it's hard work.
Well, we're raised thinking that we can just if we just had a good plan together, everything would be fine. And my latest mantra is plan less, iterate more. And as you know, if we just try some things and experiment with them, um, the notion that we can have, if we just would have the right governor or the right president or the right representative, everything would be fine, is just not going to work.
No, because they're always a product of the society itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their real objective is to be elected and to be in power.
Yeah.
And
Not to solve problems.
not to solve problems. And they kind of rely on their the constituency, or they rely if they want to have a problem solved, they ask the lobbyists to write the solution for them, which I'm not sure makes a whole lot of sense. But yeah, it's not designed for problem solving. It's designed for adopting and adapting rules and regulations that maybe will be helpful. But I'm very disappointed in the political system today. It seems like the way to get elected is to hate people. And that to me is not very productive.
All right, Fred, is there maybe a personal belief or a motto that you live by that has stayed consistent throughout the years?
Yeah. I think the most empowering thing or most energizing thing for me to think about is how do we make the world a better place for everybody? And I'm kind of dismayed that we are still have a world that's kind of so self-interested. And we get everybody saying, if you take care of me, I'll be fine. I think we should try to figure out how do we make it fine for everyone. And that could get into international politics. It could get into the local school district. It applies everywhere. So I'm energized by the thought of how do we make the world a better place for everybody.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I'm in my 30s, but I tend to be a very kind and loving person.
Mm-hmm.
So I find that when I go out or when I meet new people, I'm almost hit with this kind of pushback that being that way is naive.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where that stems from or why everyone's gotten so hardened and self-interested that this concept of just to love is like it's foreign. And it's very sad.
Yeah.
Which maybe explains why the kind of vision of the world you're talking about is like, in theory, absolutely, of course. And yet the corruption of human nature makes it almost impossible to realize it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's not worth trying, but that's what Michelle experiences, and that pushback against, because she absolutely is that way. I know that for sure. But it's like you can't expect many people to affirm that. It's kind of not where humanity is.
Or even, I had moved to a new place in Detroit, and the very first day that I'd moved there, a neighbor 4 houses down, his whole roof was on fire. So I started a GoFundMe page, and next thing I know, the whole neighborhood is gossiping about me. Who is this person? She's just trying to steal money. I can't, and I had to, meet many people and say, no, I'm your neighbor and I'm here to help and I'm here to love. That's just who I am. I would never do that. But that's an awful thing that happened. And it's just it's so quick for people to say, well, that's not like some, why would you help? What do you want? I don't want anything. I want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure where that's come from, but I've seen it a lot.
Yes.
It's kind of a core cynicism that pushes very much against what we're talking about.
Yeah. I think there's a nature nurture question there. Is our society telling us that? I mean, the whole social media thing can get so creepy with negative comments that I'm not sure whether we should blame the social media for that, or whether we should blame the inherent nature of people to do that, or is it what we grew up with? I mean, schoolyard bullies and all of that. How do we get to a root cause of that? If that was a desire to understand that better. That's a great question for the sociologists. You need to have a sociologist on the show.
Oh, I would love that.
I don't know if we know any sociologists, but we'll start looking. Brett, I know one thing that has been, and I would imagine still is with Cascade, under the current generation of leadership, but it's always been a philosophy of the company to try to enrich the life of people who work for the company, as a result of their being there. I'd like you to tell me something you learned in the course of that maybe required a course correction, but ultimately took you in a better direction.
Hmm. Well, they just as for background, we started kind of in this direction in the mid '90s or early '90s, actually. I was walking through the plant one time talking to various operators on the machinery, and I stopped at one place and talked to Ron Jimerson, who was a machine operator, and he told me his story. He was just coming from a halfway house where he had been a kind of a helper in that environment. And I said, well, gee, that's interesting. Would you be interested in help? Maybe we can hire some folks off the street and that are in welfare that we could possibly have working for us. And he said, sure, he'd give that a try. So he went down to the Hartside neighborhood and got about a half dozen folks in a van, and we got a van pool and all of that. And about 6 weeks later, they were all gone. And so we learned that we weren't ready and they weren't ready. And we went through a process. I won't bore you with the whole story, but we ended up with a very supportive program, ending up having a social worker on our floor to be able to help these folks transition from their poverty situation to being in a work environment. And it was very successful. And so from that, Dan, I learned that businesses can have an impact on people's lives in a positive way other than just pay. And that became really clear. And also, we learned as we tried to separate poverty from racism, because we didn't want to touch racism because it was something that you didn't touch back in the '90s. But because of our openness, our African American friends were saying, Fred, there's a relationship between racism and poverty, and you can't separate those two things. And so we had to kind of address ourselves with the racism situation. We became an anti-racism organization. And then we worked with folks who had been formerly incarcerated. And this kind of just built on itself that you know what? Everybody has got value. And our objective now, we kind of turned that into, if I can say one little pivot point, was our objective is to make sure everyone who works in our organization knows they're valued as a human being. And that is a high bar, knowing you're valued, but not just feel or gosh, with this or that, but knowing that you're valued as a human being. And to me, that kind of set the bar for doing the right thing to help people know that they're valued is so powerful in people's lives. Why would you not do that? And so when you're confronted with programs that maybe cost a little bit of money here or there, why would you not do that? And it's really been helpful for us to be able to have that insight.
I also think the story you just told, and I did kind of think that might be the answer to my question because I remember it really well. I also think it's a really good example of the principle you were talking about earlier about people in closely held companies and problem solving. Because the thing that I remember about that, and you really just kind of went through it, is you tried something, you found that the initial approach wasn't quite right, and you learned from it.
Right.
I remember how much you dove into getting to know people who knew about generational poverty and things of that nature because you wanted to find a way to come back and do it better. And so it wasn't this ideological thing where it's like, this is the way. You weren't sure what the way
Right.
was,
Right.
but it was important to you and you kept learning until you found it,
Right.
which I think is a good example. Yeah, I don't think people in politics do that. But people on the ground who have to solve problems every day, they have no choice.
Yep. Exactly right. Exactly right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we went through actually 3 iterations before we ended up with the one on with the social worker on the floor. And we had some very it took us probably 5 years to get through that process, but it worked, and it really set the tone for our organization from then on.
Yeah.
All right, Fred, what is your favorite part about being a father? And who is your favorite daughter? Because I know that there's always one.
I
Just when you thought you
cannot,
were just going to get easy questions.
I cannot answer the last one. They're all
Wow,
my
that's a
favorites.
dad
They
answer.
all have wonderful characteristics that I'm so proud of. Um, the favorite part of being a father is the idea that you have at this age especially, there's a comfort in knowing that the principles and the things that I worked for all my life are being carried forward. That's a really satisfying feeling that each of my daughters is carrying on in their own special way the things that we worked on together as a family, and that's so rewarding and so feels so wonderful. Um, and they each have very unique qualities. My oldest daughter is just releasing her first book. That's actually on Amazon now for pre-sale.
Ooh,
And you can go look for Larissa McAllister, and her book is around the idea of how to design buildings, specifically medical buildings. She's an architect, got her PhD in architecture, but how to design buildings so that they work for everyone, the people in them especially. So
yeah.
it's not just the four walls, but it's how people interact within them. And hospital environments are so complex. And she studied that all her career and is coming out with this book that explains how that works. So I'm very proud of that. My middle daughter, Susan, started life as a PA and then went on to get her health coaching certificate and is now doing a it is actually teaching a professor at the University of Vermont,
Wow.
teaching health coaching. And this is a field that is nascent and is desperately needed.
Yeah.
We need to have people understand that they are in control of their health and that their problems can be solved by them, primarily lifestyle changes. And they have to have a plan to do it. And health coaches are in that business of helping them understand that. And my youngest daughter, Christina, is now not only the CEO, but the chair of the board of Cascade Engineering. And I'm so proud of what she's doing to continue the work that we started over 50 years ago. So it's just a great joy to see all of that amazing talent happening in a family, and with 6 amazing grandchildren. I mean, it's just the greatest joy you can imagine.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. Good for
Good,
them.
good stuff to think about as you're looking out the window at those mountains in Jackson Hole.
Well, I try to get back to Grand Rapids occasionally and spend time with the family and my business associates and friends there and it's a great community, and Grand Rapids is very unique as you know. It's a place that has big enough to have all the problems, but small enough and cohesive enough to be able to really work at solving them. So it's really I think a great proving ground for some of these ideas.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I almost hate to wrap this up, but we're out of questions. But I do want to, first of all, Fred, thanks thanks for doing this today.
Yes.
Thank you again for the things you did way back in the day to set us up for success. And also, I also want to thank you for the leadership you've shown on these principles in business. We're a much smaller company, but I can think of all kinds of ways I don't even realize it, but that I know I'm influenced by just having listened to you all these years.
Wow.
So I really appreciate that because I think if somebody doesn't set the example and show the way, you don't really see it. But um, I, I really appreciate all of the ways that you've put your beliefs into action. Anybody can sit around and believe things. I've never known you to believe something and not do it. So we really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for that, Dan. That means a lot to me. If you spend a lifetime trying to do the right thing and try to be a positive influence, and to hear that maybe I was a positive influence with somebody, it just makes me feel wonderful. And thank you for that. And thank you for your help. I mean, I just we learned a ton together, and
We did.
it was really great for me to be able to understand the power of we thought it was PR, but it's the power of understanding how to explain a story and how to explain it in a way that makes sense to folks as opposed to just preaching it or stating it or whatever, but the idea that it would be received by people in a very effective way is what I learned from you, and I thank you for that.
Well. And I do think, I mean, that was a team effort too, because in fact, the most critical way that our company has evolved, because we haven't even called ourselves public relations for a long time. We're North Star Marketing Content because it's just what you said. It's really helping people to understand something. So it's content that's more substantive. And I think, I don't know, maybe I'm still trying to find like more clients like Cascade Engineering where there is that substantive story and it's worth the effort to tell it and read it. But I mean that's what we do,
Yeah.
and you got us started on that path. So it's been a great experience.
Thank you so much.
All right, Michelle, thanks as always
Of
for
course,
co-hosting.
every time.
Fred, thank you for doing this, and everybody, thank you for watching this epic and historic edition. We'll see you again this time next month for another 6 questions with Dan and Michelle.
See ya.